Hi everyone, welcome to Into the Wild. Before we get on to today's show, Nadia and I would like to remind everyone that whilst Into the Wild is a super accessible show, we do occasionally let out the odd swear word. So if you're a young nerd, make sure you tell your parents that. And if you're someone that doesn't like swearing, then I'm sorry for all the shit, piss, fucks and whacks. Hello, welcome to another episode of Into the Wild.
Hi.
How you doing?
Really good, thank you.
Really good?
Yeah.
How good's your day been?
I tell you what, it's windy here.
Yeah, it's been a bit windy down here as well.
The oak tree,
That
the
sounded
oak
like a
tree that you
euphemism.
gifted me, that
Yes.
I've been growing, I found blowing around the garden outside of its pot.
Good God, man.
I know. It is Wizard of Oz mad up here in Scotland right now.
Wow.
Ferries are all
Okay.
cancelled.
Ferries are all
I'm not going
cancelled.
anywhere.
No, why would you? It's windy.
I've actually battened down the hatches.
No, well, it's not as windy as that down here, but it has been windy and stormy. But we've had that sudden change to autumn. Very
turn.
sudden. One day it was 24 degrees and sunny in October. Terrifying. Then the next day, 10 degrees rainy and windy. And I was like, yes.
So tell me what autumny things you did in response.
Do you know what I yesterday I did cook a pumpkin.
Yeah, that's so good.
Genuinely
That's
did. I made a
ridiculous.
lovely soup with a pumpkin.
Oh,
in
you're
it.
so predictable.
I also made soap from horse chestnuts.
I saw on your Instagram.
Yeah.
Get you.
I know. I'm going to start doing that. Save a few
Tell me how
pennies,
that goes, because I don't trust it.
Do you not trust it?
Well,
I thought that would have been well up your street.
no, it is up my
Something our
it is up my
ancestors have
street.
done.
But you know, I feel like I get my clothes really dirty.
I mean, it's got the same chemical in it, I've been reading, as all soap has to lift grease and dirt.
Well, do you know what? Horse chestnuts aren't the best trees, so it's good for them to have another string to their bow.
There you go. Exactly
Yeah.
right. And if you just want to play with the conkers, they're great weapons. So,
Who are you fighting?
well, when I was a kid, everyone used to,
Yeah.
you know,
It's
throw
not,
conkers
it's
at
not
each
a
other as
weapon.
kids.
It's a game.
Well, it was very much a war when I was at
Oh
school.
my good lord. Anyway, tell me what you're drinking.
I've just had a brew, but I finished it. I finished the brew, but it was lovely. It was lovely, lovely.
I'm having something different for once. I'm having a raw.
It was lovely.
I'm
lovely.
having something different for once. I'm having a
Oh my
raw
God.
press green smoothie. It's called Virgin Smoothie, crafted with kiwi, pear, kale, spinach, broccoli, apple, and vitamin C.
Now you are sick, aren't you?
No, this is because I'm emerging from a sick place, and so I'm trying to put the ingredients of life back
Yeah.
into my body.
Put the health back
Yeah.
in. Crafted. It was. Why do people use words like that when they're talking about food? But it wasn't crafted. It was made.
It was just made. It was just
It
blended.
wasn't made. You didn't sit there like shaving bits of wood off of it and crafting a bench or something. Jesus. Wind your neck in. What smoothie company is that?
It's called Mockingbird, and actually, it tastes really nice.
No, I feel bad now.
Damn it! It's only one of my 5 a day. I thought I was getting
I've
each
had
of them.
Okay, so welcome to the show, nerds. Nod, it's lovely to see you.
Gorgeous.
Should we jump into nature news? Should we give these nerds a bit of hope and a bit of bliss about the nature that's going on and the conservation successes? Maybe, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right. Okay. So my first bit of nature news, I've got 2 bits, is that after a long time planning, and I know because I've spoken to a few people in the planning process about this, a family of 5 beavers have been released into a lovely enclosure in London for the first time. Beavers are back in London, 400 years.
Wow.
Family of 5. The project was part of the Mayor's Rewild London Fund to help local authorities, civil society organisations and community groups create new green spaces and encourage wildlife. So it's down towards Ealing. It's been the work of Ealing Wildlife Trust and Citizen Zoo. Sean McCormack, who's been on the show before, has played a massive hand in this. So congratulations to him. And it's lovely to see the beavers already at work, building dams, slowing down the trickles of water to create wetlands in London. How exciting is that?
That's amazing.
I'm so happy. I can't wait to go down and see them, and maybe we'll do a little pod on it as well.
Where did you say it was again?
In Ealing in West London.
Okay.
Yeah, that means nothing
No,
to
it
you,
doesn't
does it?
at all.
No. Why did you ask?
That's-
What's your bit of nature news? What's gone on?
So this was just something. There's a few Instagram accounts that I follow that generally share positive nature news, but this one just stuck out. And actually, maybe it's a bit of a theme because I really like the big restoration turning back of crap that we've done in the past stories. The world's biggest dam removal project will soon begin on the Klamath River, which is a river that runs through Oregon and California in the west of North America. So after 100 years of being dammed, it will, the river will flow free once again.
That's lovely.
There's been huge amounts of advocacy by local tribes, rivers being a really important part of people's cultural identity and food security. And so salmon, once again, will be able to swim free. And also, there's all kinds of problems with dams, which is obviously not least, things being able to migrate up and down and move in a normal way, but also the water in rivers, as we know, kind of has like a dynamism to it, an organic way of cutting through and moving through the landscape. The process of damming doesn't allow rivers to behave in the way that they need to behave. And birds and aquatic life depends on kind of, I guess, just the living breathingness of a river. There's issues around the reservoirs and dams being breeding grounds for the kind of bacteria which, like the blue-green algae type stuff that is toxic to life.
Yeah.
So like there's, the massive impacts of dams, So that, I don't know, it's just exciting to be able to go like,
lovely.
Actually, we don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah. There's like a realization of going, we fucked up.
Yeah.
Let's start taking that down.
Yeah, and that kind of like interesting thing of like people can get, maybe because it was 100 years ago, right? Those people that put it in are dead. So there's not the whole ego thing of like, oh God, we're going to have to backtrack on this thing that we did.
Yeah, exactly.
So yay!
And, maybe done for understandable reasons back then. This is the thing. Things were done for damn it.
Yeah, back it made sense at the time.
It made sense at the time, not anymore.
It did make sense to a lot of people at the time. It made sense to probably a certain group of people, but probably like indigenous people to those areas. They were like, this doesn't make sense.
Less so.
So love to rivers.
Oh, that's nice. My second bit, which I saw online, and then I've just got a little bit to say on this. Bhutan announced a milestone achievement with a 39.5% increase in snow leopard numbers. Which is incredible. The presence of 134 snow leopards has been confirmed in Bhutan by the National Snow Leopard Survey, which I assume we can trust them on that, 2022 to 2023, supported by the Bhutan for Life project and the WWF Bhutan. This represents 39.5% increase from the country's first survey in 2016, when 96 individuals were counted. Incredible.
Oh, that makes me so happy. They're one of the things I want to see in the world.
Yeah, they're just such beautiful, like, secretive cats.
Yeah.
To know they're, making a jump back. I know there's a lot of community conservation going on in their population range and geographical range and stuff. So that's, it's lovely to see the numbers actually coming in. So yeah, hooray for Bhutan.
Thank you for sharing that with me. Oh God, they are cuddly cats.
They are cuddly cats. I mean, I wouldn't, but I would want to, if that makes any sense.
Do what?
Cuddle one.
Oh.
Where was your mind going?
Cut that out, Oscar.
That's an accusation I didn't want on record.
It's just the way that you said, like, you would though, wouldn't you?
You said, I want to cuddle one. Let's not, Oscar, take all that out.
Yeah, that's...
That got weird.
Bloody brilliant news.
Yeah, no, I agree. So it was lovely. I was very happy when I saw that. Well, nerds, there's a bit of like nature news for you to keep you upbeat and happy in this mad odd world. And today, should we just jump into our episode? Should we jump into our main topic?
Let's jump.
Let's go. Right, here we go. So this episode, nerds, we are talking all about gardens in the UK and the wildlife in them and what they hold for importance of people. So I will say, if you're listening out of the UK, this episode will be very UK focused, talking about how our gardens rurally and in urban areas, what they can do for wildlife, the importance of them. So let's start with talking about the UK. 87% of our population of our population in the UK has a garden.
Wow.
1 in 8 people do not. Gets a bit higher when you look at cities. So London is about 21 to 25% do not have a garden. And I assume that's the same or similar pattern when we go to other cities as well. Second highest is Scotland, or third highest, is Scotland with 13% do not have a garden. England, so specifically England, sorry, it's not the UK. I could only really find proper stats for England. 13 million hectares covers the whole of the UK, of which 4.9% is residential gardens. That makes up about 639,254 hectares, which is about 2,468 square miles, which is just a wee bit bigger than the country of Brunei in Asia. Nadia.
Wow. Brunei.
Yeah. So now you can really vividly picture that.
That's new information for me, and I'm assuming listeners.
Yeah, well, yeah.
It helps to picture
It's only
it.
new information for Ryan from the last hour ago.
It's not, usually we use Wales as our benchmark, but Brunei, welcome to the family.
Welcome to the Club of Statistics, Brunei.
Did you just know that? Did you know about Brunei?
Oh, massive fan.
Yeah.
Always have been. No, I looked it up.
Lovely.
I looked it up.
Interesting.
It was quite hard to find a country that was about the same size. But yeah, so that's how much land gardens cover.
That surprises me. I think it does surprise me, actually. It's way more people having a garden than I thought. I did have an idea about, in terms of land mass, what residential gardens occupy, but I never really thought. I mean, I guess I'm looking around where I live now. Pretty much everybody's got a garden I can see.
Yeah, and do you know what? Even where I look now, a lot of the houses have gardens, and when I go down into Archway a little bit lower down, even the council estates, a lot of the houses there do have even very small gardens.
I wonder if that includes shared gardens, and I also wonder whether it includes, what's the minimum amount, because I know at the front of your house there is a little bit of a yard.
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if that's also included.
Yeah, exactly. So
it should be.
And I don't know if, it should be. It's outdoor space. Balconies, even large balconies, could be, classified as a little garden and a little space. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. So it is more, but also it's not a huge amount of land.
No, not huge. So yeah, we do also, just as well as those statistics, which are really useful to know. I think it's good to understand us Brits and our relationship with gardening. We have a strong one, right? The garden centre and plant buying industry is really big here in the UK. I can imagine the revenue from garden centres on a sunny Saturday afternoon is huge. We do love to potter. We love to tinker as a tinker. Is tinker?
Tinker's a word.
Yeah, but can it be used in relation to potting a plant?
100%. Will you tinker around in the garden?
Tinker and potter. I think we are a nation of tinker and potterers. We enjoy peeking over the fence to see how somebody else's begonias are doing. I imagine there's kind of curtain twitching and judgment. I myself have been judged by both of my neighbours on the unruly nature of my garden, and I know many people have had to have awkward conversations with their neighbours as to why their garden is perhaps not cookie cutter perfect mowed lawn and perfect borders. But yeah, we are a nation of garden lovers, and something that I think has increased since COVID. Kind of that time spent at home growing vegetables. I know that growing vegetables is increasing loads as well. So I wonder, on a global level, the Victorians, I think, were the people that really thrust this idea of having this really beautiful ornamental space, a really nicely curated space. Because we are a colonizing nation, we have explored the globe and pulled back plants from all around the world. So a lot of our recognisable plants that we see in garden centres are things that certainly are not native here. In fact, there are more non-native plants now in the UK than there are native plants, particularly as it comes to a garden setting.
Wow.
The kind of shrubs and bushes that people plant, because they look nice and they grow really well in our climate. People don't like to think it, but we are heavily influenced culturally by the things that we see around us, and we kind of want to replicate the gardens that kind of, those beautiful kind of well curated, perfect lawn with the flowers and that is something that is really culturally ours. I think, I have travelled to other places and gardens don't look like the way that we garden. I guess potentially it's a status thing, maybe, if you've got, to show that you've got time to just garden. And I think there's probably a lot of judgment going on.
We will be talking a bit more, but before we run this down, I had a lovely chat with someone called Kate Bradbury, who loves garden wildlife, loves writing about wildlife in your gardens, and talking about the importance of it. So I thought if we can get a chat with her, that can give us a baseline. So Nadia, should we have a listen to my chat with Kate, and then we can talk all about it?
Would love to.
Let's go. Okay, so this is a chat I had very recently with Kate Bradbury about garden wildlife. We're going to be talking about gardens today, garden wildlife. Have you always had a garden?
Yes, I think so. Apart from when, like, a couple of times when I was sort of in my early 20s and sort of living in student accommodation and things, I think, I grew up with a garden. That was my sort of way in, really.
So you had one as a kid, like?
Yes.
What was your favourite part of a garden as a kid?
Oh, it was my dad's vegetable patch, but my dad left when I was really young. So it was like this abandoned vegetable patch that sort of just represented lots of loss and longing. But I sort of, I just used to hang out there on my own and play with the cow parsley and butterflies and things. And it sounds quite sad. It was sad, actually. It was sad. It was really sad. But I think that's what gave me my connection was just sort of...
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, being in this space that had been emptied by someone else.
Yeah. Oh, that is... Do you know what? I exactly know what you mean. It's sad, but for some reason, it's not feeling sad, but it is sad.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I'm talking about it now, I'm like... but yeah, and I think I probably owe quite a lot of my whole career to that sort of connection, really. So yes, I can't complain.
Gardens have always been like my grandparents had gardens, my mum and dad had gardens. I long for a garden now, but I just it's that having that outdoor space, and like you said, so many different bits of it can mean different things or symbolise different things, especially to do with wildlife and stuff. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about today, because this episode is all about garden wildlife, and not necessarily just what people need to do, but the power of what, if people did do, what that can actually do for biodiversity in the UK and other countries around the world, I'm sure is similar, that have like that kind of like urbanized gardens. So I'm just going to go straight out there, Kate, and say to you, like, for you personally, what do you think has the most potential for gardens supporting biodiversity in the UK? When we look at it overall, everyone with a garden, what is the biggest potential there for garden wildlife?
So I think there's 30 million gardens in the UK. That number's... Whoa. I know, it's massive, isn't it?
That's bad.
That number's only going to go up with more house building and development and whatever. And I think what we can do, and what we've already got, we've got a network of gardens. We see them as our individual spaces. They're walled or they're fenced, but actually they comprise a very large mosaic habitat. The potential of all of these things is that we can create corridors. We can create this vast network of corridors, basically enabling species to travel north, because that's what they're all doing with climate change. We've got species arriving, we've got species that are here that are travelling north. And actually, by using our gardens, those gardens can connect nature reserves. So we've got larger habitats, you've got gardens in between to provide corridors. You've got some rare species that are isolated. If you've got gardens, then they can potentially connect to each other, which can prevent extinction. It's a huge untapped resource. And we just need more people to get on it, really. So
when we say get on it as well, because there's such an inherited way of gardening, I think, especially in the UK, when we look at like the Victorian era of how gardens were and stuff, there's that inherited, I mean, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a minute, of the tidiness and the inherited of ornamental plants, and, all of this stuff has its place, or even just a garden for recreational, or like for children to be able to enjoy, or for people to be able to sit and enjoy. What do we think people need to start doing when we say like people need to do more? What do we mean by that?
Good question. We need more gardens like they were 50 years ago, basically. We need plants. We need small amounts of hardscaping. We need less decking, paving, plastic grass, more plants. And we need connections between those gardens. So we need holes under fences. We need things to be a bit more rickety, not necessarily messy, but, like someone said to me a few years ago, allotments now are like what gardens used to be like 50 years ago. Wow. And that's why allotments have potentially a lot more wildlife in them than our gardens do these days, because you've got bits of long grass, you've got open compost heaps, you've got, everyone just getting their food collected in a bin by the council every week. Like that didn't used to happen. People used to put that outside in a big pile at the end of the garden. When I was growing up, it was just a pile just in the corner at the back, and people don't do that anymore. So I think we need to reconnect with our gardens. We need to rewild ourselves, and we need to recognise the importance of the space outside our back door. And not necessarily, you don't have to do loads of stuff. You don't have to have a big meadow. You don't have to, plant loads of trees. You don't have to dig a pond. But just recognising that life is supported by other living things that grow in the ground would be a really good start.
Yeah, that reconnection. I think, because what you said about that, having 30 million gardens and that potential for corridor, and like you said, like things need to, I guess we hear corridors and we go, yeah, we need to make this huge network that leads all the way, and it's not quite, I don't feel it as quite like that. I feel it more as it's almost like green spaces in London. They're like pockets where things can like move and survive in places for a bit if they need to. There's enough to like rest there. Stepping stones, that's what I'm looking for. Stepping stones on the way around, or whether they're migrating or whether they're just like locally migrating around that area and stuff. So I think that's what we need to see more of, like you said, that life kind of in them. Is it with gardens, is it area dependent because for what people need to do? Because the UK is not a huge country, but it is big for an animal like a bee.
Yeah.
So, for us, it might not be huge, but is it area dependent? Should we be creating different spaces in the south of the UK for gardens than we are in the north or in Scotland compared to we are in Wales? Does it change like that, or does it really not matter?
Well, kind of a bit of both, really. Habitat's a habitat. So a pond is a pond, an area of long grass is an area of long grass. I think if you're really keen, and I would urge you to be really keen because it's really exciting and important, is understand different local niches where you live. So, for example, I live in Brighton. There are two migrant species, the long-tailed blue butterfly and the European swallowtail butterfly. Both of these species breed somewhere on the south coast every year a little bit. With climate change, that's only going to increase. So me, like looking out for the little climate change refugees coming over from France, I grow their food plants.
Wow. Oh, that's so nice.
So, every year I'm disappointed. But they're literally down the road. I hate them. There's no point in doing that in Scotland. But in Scotland, butterflies are just on this massive sort of like pilgrimage north. There's the speckled woods arriving in Scotland, the comma. So you can look up, but you can trace where these species are on various distribution maps, and you can start growing their food plants and you can start providing for those species. So I think that's quite an interesting thing to do. With bumblebees, there's little pockets of very rare species. So in, where are we? Salisbury Plains, there's the shrill-carder bumblebee. Then in parts of Essex, around there's also the shrill-carder and some other UK BAP species, parts of Wales as well. If you live on the fringes of those very wild habitats, you can grow some of their food plants. They're a lot fussier than the more common bees. They need things like white dead nettle, horehound, black horehound, red clover, things like that. If you grow those plants in your garden, potentially on a good day, when males are going out in search of queens and going beyond their existing habitats, you might, potentially get a rare bee in your garden, which would be really amazing. So yes, I think definitely you could tailor it to certain things.
I like that though. I like about looking in the local area and seeing where you live and kind of going like, what do I have around here anyway? So, whether I'm growing it for the things I know are definitely here, or growing it for things that could be here, or growing it for things that might move across, you're not sure, but just having it anyway kind of works, doesn't it?
Just preparing.
If everyone just had red or white dead nettle in their garden anyway.
Exactly. That's a dream, isn't it?
Creating it. Oh, the dream for me. I love it. But no, that's interesting to know, because the habitat or the environment, is different when you go north to south in the UK. But it's always interesting how this should this copy what we have in our gardens and stuff like that. But I guess also that is connecting with your local patch, right?
Absolutely.
You're not going to be able to grow some things in a colder climate that you can, or at different times of year further south anyway. So
yeah, I always say with catering for bees, I always say, have something in flower between March and November. That's very standard advice. But in Brighton, you can have something in flower all year round. It's really easy.
Same in London, 100%.
Yeah. So you can tailor different things.
Yeah. And that's what I like about gardening, though. That's what I like about being out there in the garden. At our community garden now, me and my friend Kel that run that, we were so surprised that things are all still green and growing and flowering. I'm like, it is October.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a pretty bonkers October, yeah.
It's not even mild, it's been hot. But today it's the first day that's rained, and I'm like, this is autumn. Like, now things are going to start
still
changing.
Really warm,
but you're right.
Though.
Yeah, you can still have flowers going all the way up until December sometimes. It is mad how it's gone. But then when you go across, when I've been up into the Isle of Bute or around Scotland, it's not like that. Things have changed, don't get me wrong, but not to the scale that where we are, where you can have flowers until December or anything.
Yeah.
For gardening, what are your biggest no-nos for gardening wildlife? Or actually, before I ask about wildlife, what's your biggest no-nos for any garden?
For any garden?
Is it gnomes or something?
Is it gnome? I don't have any strong feelings about gnomes. I feel like I'm letting you down.
No strong feelings?
No strong feelings about gnomes. If you want a gnome, have a gnome. In fact, I've seen lots of gnomes with some nice mosses and lichens on them. So potentially,
I cannot believe we've gone down the side of. Do you know what? Gnomes are beautiful.
I think my biggest no is it's got to be plastic grass, hasn't it? It's just horrible.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no good can come from it, and I say that as someone who's got plastic grass next door. I've got plastic grass on one side and paving stones on the other, so I'm very familiar with this problem. And it's just it's horrible, and it contains forever chemicals that leak. We're going to be drinking it in 20 years' time. It's not good. No good can come from this. I appreciate that some people have mobility issues, and you need to tailor your garden to be able to use it in that way. That's really important. But I still don't think plastic grass is the answer, and I still think people with mobility issues as well need the connection with nature as much as everyone else. So
100%.
I saw what was it? It was a new housing development, and it was designed for people with mobility issues, and it was just plastic grass. And it was like, you're just denying people a chance to connect with nature just because it's easier to do that. And I think, we need to have conversations about making gardens more accessible to more people, 100%. But is it plastic grass? Is it the answer? I just don't think it is.
No, I don't think it is. I think you're right. It's a quick solution. And I don't think it's to nature. I think it's to the outdoors. Yeah, 100%. This gives you outdoor access at ease. But I don't think it's a connection to nature. And I think, I'm speaking from someone that is able-bodied, so I don't want to kind of assume this, but exactly. I would imagine it's quite patronizing to say that someone with mobility issues requires plastic grass. Like,
I know.
I don't know. That's my thoughts. Like I said, I'm able-bodied, so I don't want to assume that. But for me, it's got that ick of like patronizing. Yeah. Going, well, this is why. It's like, well, hang on a minute. Like, but
also just paving over a whole garden. It can't. Is that what people want?
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's. Yeah, icky. So that's one of your biggest no-nos. Does that coincide with like gardening for wildlife then?
Oh, 100%, 100%. Like people come up to me and they say things like, "Oh, my kids really love hedgehogs. I really love hedgehogs, but I've got plastic grass." And I didn't realise, because the hedgehogs stopped coming in when I got my plastic grass. And I said, well, they will. Yeah, they eat food out of the ground.
Well, they eat, yeah.
Yeah. So, and you feel like, what can you say? They've been lied to essentially by companies that have sold them this convenient thing that they don't have to look after. You actually do have to look after it quite a lot. You have to. My next door neighbour vacuums his plastic grass, which is very common. People buy vacuum cleaners for their grass now. And from a wildlife point of view, you can't feed on it. I see robins and blackbirds picking up spilled seed from my next door neighbour's plastic lawn, and it fills me with dread because they must be ingesting tiny little bits of plastic. I think tiny little bits of plastic will be getting down the drains, becoming microplastics, entering the food chain in the sea. You know, in Brighton, I live 2-minute walk from the sea. You know, everything that goes down the drains on my road just goes straight to the sea. It's there in 5 minutes.
Wow.
So, you know, I worry about the impact it has on wildlife in terms of denying them a food, denying them a meal. Earthworms, how are they faring with all this toxicity leaching into the soil? And then just the physical thing of removing all of the plants that support life. And then, you know, at the other end, you've got what's leaching into the sea and entering the food chain. I mean, it's just really toxic and really sad. And it makes me really sad seeing it and seeing gardens removed and replaced with it.
Yeah. So what I've got to ask now, what are your biggest yeses then?
A pond.
Yeah.
I love a
Everyone
pond.
tells me that.
It's just the best. Just sitting
Is
by
it?
a pond and just watching. I was just out feeding my tadpoles actually before this, and yes, I still have tadpoles in October, which is great. Which is why I'm feeding them now. I'm trying to get them to just grow some legs,
To grow up,
just
Get out.
get on with it, get out. I need to clear my pond out. So yeah, it's just lovely, and it supports so much life. You have amphibians, of course, but you have aquatic invertebrates. You have birds feeding from it. You have hedgehogs drinking from it. You know, it's just like it's the centre of my garden. It's beautiful, and I love it. I also love a big open compost heap.
Yeah.
In my garden, I've got a little space between the shed and the wall. I've got a very small garden, and I just pile everything up in between the shed and the wall under the overhanging roof so it doesn't get too wet. And that's where everyone lives but me. Like, it's basically hedgehog central. It's great. And so it provides lots of life. You know, like a closed compost bin is a closed shop. As an open compost heap is just, you know, this huge potential for supporting lots and lots of living things. Love me a bit of long grass, full of butterflies, a little bit of meadow. Nice flowery things, native plants. But I think, pond, long grass and an open compost heap are my absolute wouldn't live without.
Yeses.
Yeah. Yes.
It's mad, isn't it? Because all these things as well is like it goes back to what we said at the beginning with this inherited passed down, which is something we used to have. Maybe not so much long grass. Maybe that's still something that's always been a battle, but it's these things that we used to have that have just been lost, maybe due to this urge for convenience or this life with no time, I say with quotations either side. So I think we kind of like lost this element where actually it is easy to do. It's easy to grow. It's not always easy to get what you specifically want from it. You sometimes, you know, if you let stuff grow, you get stuff you don't want. And you kind of have to let that happen to see. But I would just imagine that it's easier to do, but it feels harder for some reason. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think that's marketing. I think we've been conditioned to think that, and even gardeners. You know, I've worked for gardening magazines for nearly 20 years. You know, and we are very much sold this kind of dream of not having to do much work if we just, you know, do this. If we lay this patio, or, you know, grow this plant that doesn't need much pruning. And everything's got to be neat and tidy and compartmentalised. And actually, I don't see what's wrong with letting things go and you know, just being a bit messy. You know, as I get older and I become less mobile, I'm going to fully embrace having a really wild garden, because it is wild now in terms of I've created lots of habitats, but also I'm a gardener and I still go out and I prune and I tidy things up. And I don't really see what's wrong with letting go and just having it just look after itself.
So my dad refuses it, right? And I don't know if he'll listen to this, but I'm going to say this. He refuses to do it. Like, I was like, it's like, just let your grass grow. Not even all of it. Just do a patch. Do like a metre by metre square. Like, just do that over there. Would not do it, right? Would refuse to do it. And I was really trying to get him to get like native wildflowers in some area of the garden, right? And he wouldn't do it. So in the end, I found a great company that sell organic plugs of organic native wildflowers. So it's super easy, just get delivered, and, you know, not so much money. So for every Christmas, birthday, Father's Day now, I just buy them for him. So he got like organic native English bluebells. He got like cowslips and things like that. And my mum is the kind of mum going, oh, well, we have to put them in. Like, it will upset Ryan if we don't put them in. So we're going to have to. It's like, when someone buys you an ornament that you don't want, but you have to put it out. With plants, you can't put it out every time I come round. So now he's just got like bluebells in his garden and cowslips. I think it's great.
Yeah. He hates you, doesn't he?
Oh, he despises it. Yeah, but my mum loves it. She's like, oh, my bluebells are out again this year.
Oh.
So it's good. It's like, I think like, yeah, I mean, that's a severe example of just doing it for someone. But that is that absolute refusal of, this is how I want my garden.
Exactly.
Maybe it's just a man thing as well. But that refusal of, I don't want to change it. Which is a shame.
I think a lot of people are really stuck in their ways, but again, it is conditioning. It is stuff that we read in magazines and that we've been, it has been fed down to us and taught us by, if we fell in love with gardening as a young person and were taught by our parents or grandparents who we absolutely adored that this is the way to do it, it's very hard to get out of that mindset. It's very hard to suddenly think, oh, I'm just going to let the aphids go on my roses because I get a chiff-chaff that comes in every October and just balances on my rose stems and eats all my aphids and I love it. So, you know what I mean? It's like...
Can you imagine if that was the normal thought? Oh, sorry, and I don't mean to use the word normal. I mean like that most people would not think that.
Most people wouldn't even notice.
I'd love it if they would. Can you imagine if like you just overheard someone in like Cafe Nero? Just, oh yeah, I don't mind the aphids on my rose because the chiff-chaff comes out. That's the world I want to live in, Kate.
I get chiff-chaffs, I get garden warblers, I get white throats, black caps. And they all come in spring and autumn and they eat all my aphids. And I'll just have a little time sitting in my chair looking at them.
So they just take the aphids off the branches of the rose?
Yeah, I mean, the chiff-chaffs do. The white throats are a little bit more shy. And the black caps.
Didn't know birds did that.
Yeah, sparrows are good. I never have in fact, in summer I never see aphids on my plants because the sparrows have 3 broods. And they just come in and just take all of the aphids off.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Oh God, that's going to be the takeaway for me. Is that I knew like obviously ladybirds and stuff was great for that, but I didn't realise.
No, loads of birds,
sparrows and stuff.
And tits. I mean, tits will feed caterpillars to their young, but when they're desperate, then they switch to aphids as well. So actually, by removing aphids from your garden, you're just denying all of these lovely birds a meal. So yeah, aphids for the win.
There we go. So, how should or do you think local councils and governments should be supporting residents, and how should they be supporting residents when it comes to creating nature-friendly environments in their gardens? Do you think it's something that councils and governments have a responsibility to encourage and support as well?
I think allotments, for example, most allotments are owned by councils and people get letters for non-cultivation, and people with wilder allotments that have been deliberately left wild for wildlife send letters for non-cultivation. I think the attitude there needs to change. So that's a really easy thing. An easy first step is that councils just need to catch up with what we know today compared to 50 years ago, whatever, when you had to have a certain area cultivated. That would be one easy win. I think I'd really like to see planning permission for front gardens, the paving over of front gardens to park cars, and for plastic grass. I think if you brought those things in, then just the effort of having to apply for planning permission would just stop people doing it as a quick fix. Sometimes that planning will go ahead. Some people really need, my friend's got a disabled son. She had to get rid of her front garden because she had to put a parking space in her garden because she needed access to the garden. Sometimes that planning permission will always go ahead. It needs to happen for some people. But for most people, it kind of doesn't. And I think our front gardens, we've lost so many of our front gardens. I think 25% in some areas of front gardens have disappeared. And that's a huge, put together, not individually, not your little space, but put together, that's a huge landmass that's been lost. Yeah. It's been lost to hedgehogs, it's been lost to birds, it's been lost to bees. Biodiversity is at a really critical point in the UK, and we need to just all take this more seriously. And one thing that our councils could do is just encourage us to stop paving over things and covering stuff in plastic by a really simple planning permission law.
That's really interesting. I didn't think it was going to go down that route, because my mind always goes whether it's like financially supporting people or actually putting things in going, if everyone had this, let's just say like a bug box or something like that, like random, right? That people are starting to give in these, or putting them in the local area more, so people start to see it like at local green spaces, or where I am in Highgate and Archway, there's a lot of just random patch of grass with a few benches and a few trees. But having that kind of stuff up there kind of reminds people, like, we have stuff here. This is London, but you have stuff, and it could then filter off into people's their home way of life, where they go, oh, do you remember the kids enjoyed the bug box there, so let's bring something into the house. But I didn't think about the planning permission point of view, because that's really interesting. If you're putting, like you said, not barriers in the way to make it harder for people, but you're just going, well, this stuff does need to be considered, whether it's necessary or whether it is just because you want a quick fix.
Yeah.
So
or can you do it? Or can you do it in a more sensitive way? Can you, if you've got to pay, if you really want a parking space, people have cars. By rights, they should be able to park in their front garden, whatever. But, if you really want that, can you do it in a way that means you keep some of the grass, or you keep some of the plants? You have it so that the water drains away, because obviously the paving over of gardens also contributes to flooding in cities, which contributes to all of the crap ending up in the sea. Not that that's our fault, but but yeah. And I think you're right. I think having those habitats in place is really encouraging. I think those lovely big signs that you get sometimes in parks where it says, this is who lives here. We've got all these lovely birds, and we've got all these lovely butterflies. Just having that, just reminding people that those species live there as well. I think that can filter out. And also, I think people with lovely gardens should pay less tax. I mean, why not? we're doing a good service.
Can you imagine? Yeah.
Tax breaks for gardeners, wildlife gardeners.
Yeah. Or maybe just pay a tax on plastic grass.
Yeah.
You can have it, but you have to pay
there should be a plastic
biodiversity
grass
tax.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think you might have said this already when you said about a pond, but let me ask you the last question anyway. What would be your one bit of advice to people with any form of outdoor space, whether it's a window, ledge, balcony, front doorstep, front garden, back garden, when it comes to creating a nature-focused garden? What would be your one bit of bit of advice?
I mean, I love my pond, but I've also lived in a high-rise flat in Manchester city centre, and a pond wouldn't have been appropriate there. So I don't know if I did have a compost heap, which was quite
questionable at best.
It was quite weird. But I tell you what, I got aphids and I got ladybirds on my 6th floor of my council flat. So it does. If you build it, they will come. Pond's probably not appropriate if you've got a really tiny little balcony space, but you could have a little container pond, I suppose, or you could have a bird bath. Some form of water is really important. So bird baths, birds will visit balconies in city centres, 100%. So bird bath, pond, container pond. Lots of people say any pond size will do. You can have a pond and a washing up bowl, and that's great, and you'll get things using it. In my experience, you only really get mosquitoes using it. Obviously, you get all the stuff you can't see, the water bears and things, but you only really get mosquitoes using a pond that size. And if you don't have the predators to eat the mosquitoes, you're basically just creating a little bit of a headache for yourself. Yeah. You really want a pond or some body of water where you get the mosquitoes, because they're a really important part of the food chain, but you also get the things that eat them. You get the tadpoles, and you get the diving beetles, and the other things like that, the aquatic invertebrates. So you have a balance. I've actually had fewer mosquito bites in my garden since putting in the pond than before.
Wow.
Because it's a balanced habitat.
Yeah, right.
That's anecdotal. There's no science there, but I think I would just be cautious against just having any old pot of water, because you could attract mosquitoes. However, I do fully support and endorse hoverfly lagoons. Again, I probably wouldn't put it on a balcony because they do smell quite bad. So that's one for the end of the garden. But hoverfly lagoons is basically a bucket of water with some leaves and grass clippings and other crap like twigs and stuff in. So it really smells bad. And then it attracts loads of hoverflies who like to lay eggs in stagnant water. So that's a really fun one to do. But yes, again, not for balcony. Let me think. Just nice. Do you know what? I know what I always say. And this is because
the listeners can't see, but Kate is just talking whilst rubbing her head constantly. Going, there's just so much.
It's so much. This is what I say. This is what I write about in my books. Do you know what? Mediterranean herbs are really good for people with very small gardens, with roof gardens, balconies. If you live on a canal boat, whatever, Mediterranean herbs, because they don't need much. Lavender, rosemary, chives, oregano, thyme. If you let them flower, you have to share them with the bees. Then they will flower and produce lots and lots of lovely nectar and pollen for bees. They don't need much watering, so you don't have to water them every day, which is really good. And they're pretty, and also they can help you in your kitchen. So that's for really small gardens. But if you do have something larger, then I would say a pond, which is great. I've got toads breeding in my pond. I don't know how they got here. I live in a very urban area. I think someone probably introduced them, but I now have a responsibility. I've got to look after these toads.
Yeah.
So I can't move house.
So I live and die in Brighton.
Yeah, here I am. Still here. And a nice open compost heap, because everyone lives there and it's fun.
Nice. Nice. Well, Kate, thank you so much for giving us some more in-depth look at wildlife in gardens around the UK. And I hope people listening have got some nice ideas. Thank you so much for joining us on Into the Wild.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. Take care.
Oh, that was nice.
It was.
Oh, she's good, isn't she?
She is. And you know what? It was so like talking with Kate. She's got you can kind of feel her passion and feel her just warmth and love for her garden and all,
she's into
things like that. There's some interesting things.
She mentioned compost a lot.
She did. Gardeners
she's
do.
A compost fan.
Gardeners do. I thought it was really interesting what she said about how gardens have changed over the last 50 years and how the allotments now are what gardens used to be. Because if you visit, or even if you just walk past an allotment, they are so impressive, I think, for what people have. Even the ones that are let go a little bit, there's quite often always flowers, there's lovely veggies. You do see a lot of wildlife just out and about in them. Yeah. And I think
there's an unruliness to them. It's lovely.
There really is. And I think it's a good visual to say, if you go and look at an allotment where you are now and start to tell yourself, that's what gardens are. That's what gardens, used to be, back in 1950s, 1960s even. So to start thinking about how that's changed to today and maybe the use has changed or maybe the need or the size or anything like that, there is a big difference to what gardens are now, I think, to an allotment style. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it all leans into, I guess, socially where we're at, right? Like there's not many people, it's a lot of energy to grow your own vegetables when you can just nip down the co-op and for a quid get a bag of spuds. So like, I think, like culturally, those gardens that people used to use to maybe people used to have like a couple of pigs at the end of the garden, a few hens.
Did they?
And grow veg. They did.
Just had a couple of pigs.
Yeah, no, that's a thing.
Oh, I
used to live in an old terrace with a lot of the old terraces with the big long gardens. People would have those lovely kind of like country gardens. People would often have like a pig at the end, and then they'd have a veg plot on the side. A little bit like it would all be a bit wild, and they served a function. I think if you had money, I'd love a pig at the end of my garden.
Yeah, I want to. That sounds like a kid's book. The pig at the end of the garden.
I was just about to honk.
Go on.
Not honk. What's it called? Oink. But yeah, I think it depends who you were, your social status and class. But definitely, like a lot of people would have used their gardens for growing vegetables. For the purposes of eating vegetables. Now I think people do it as a hobby, right? Like people grow vegetables because actually there's something quite wholesome and nice about it. And even though they probably can't afford vegetables. So I think there's been a shift in terms of like who has gardens and what they're used for. I think a lot of now, like I see a lot of people, my sense is that people want to use them as outdoor recreational spaces, particularly if you remember in COVID, people could meet outdoors in the garden. They've become places to gather and like have social. So there's kind of maybe more paving, more decking. Like that's probably a new thing in recent history.
I would. Well, certainly the style that it's presented in. Do you know what I mean? People have always used their garden space for maybe not so much, having people around for a barbecue or, having like a big party outside. So, but I still think gardens have that beautiful space where you can have a social gathering in them, but you can also mix in that, you know, those lovely flowering plants or a pond in the garden. I mean, when there's a pond in a garden, for God's sake, it's like I don't know many people that don't go and peek their head over the pond and go and have a look. Do you know what I mean? Even people that aren't that connected to the natural world go, I'm going to have a look at the pond. So there's such it's almost like the center of a garden. Even if it's not in the center, it's like kind of like it attracts people to it to go and have a look. So you can, like, it's a focal point. Yeah, and you can mix that kind of recreational use, that social use in with the kind of other things that gardens are beautiful for. And I think Kate brought up the beautiful point as well with allotments having that vibe of kind of rickety and a bit, I don't know what the right word is, because I don't want to they all sound negative, but when you say like a bit unorganized, the fence post might not be kind of like really straight, there might be a lifted one, but that allows wildlife to move around still while you contain what you need to contain in your garden. And I think that's something that we've really in the UK lost with our gardens. It has to be regimented straight, you know, fill in that gap in the fence, don't let anything come in. And there could be an abundance of reasons why we've needed to do stuff like that, but stopping stuff coming in also stops stuff being able to leave or travel around. And, you know, the hedgehogs are a perfect example of the decline in numbers for things like that, along with other issues as well. But it's like, you know, I think looking at kind of how, like, oh God, I can't believe I'm about to say this out loud, hickledy-pickledy allotments are. Oh, fuck. Hickledy-pickledy allotments are. I know, that was a moment. Oh God, I'm so old.
You are, and actually, I'm surprised you're not. I'm surprised you're not pottering it in an allotment right now.
Oh, do you know what? There's something about that vibe though that even
it's very you.
It's very me, isn't it?
No, I know what you're saying. If you imagine that I honestly think the really highly manicured gardens is an aspirational middle class thing.
Yeah.
If you have got enough time to create this perfect, picture perfect garden, it demonstrates to the outside world how much time you've got in your hands, and how you can have this like perfect representation. I think there has been a blurring of the edges. I think the middle classes now do spend a lot of time rewilding their garden and introducing wildlife. There's been a big surge in, you know, if you imagine the perfectly curated lawn as sharp edges, we are now softening and blurring those edges into having something a little bit more cottage style, a little bit more wild. Like I get the sense that people are like feeling nostalgic right now about wanting to be in a world which is more nature rich and actually less kind of harsh and bold and regimented, and actually, you know, it still takes quite a lot me not doing anything in my garden for 2 years and being like, oh, I'm just rewilding it. It's an absolute mess. Actually, like, wildlife friendly gardening does actually take a heap load of effort.
It does
to make it look, you know, that beautiful. And so, yeah, no, I'm very, very supportive of like this movement to have a less kind of regimented, perfect garden.
Absolutely,
space.
and that's and like I said, we're not just talking about what you've got in your garden. We're talking about the fence panels. We're talking about stuff like that. It doesn't have to, you know, if there's a hole in your fence, leave it. Let's see what uses it. Frogs, toads, hedgehogs, anything like that might come through.
You know, even just I did a little bit of research before the programme, like, you know, wildlife friendly gardening. If you Google that, like RSPB, Wildlife Trust, Plant Life, Royal Horticultural Society, there's just pages and pages of advice, like the information available now to people if you're interested in wildlife and what to do is huge. There is still like a big awareness gap. You know, there are still heaps of the population who aren't really aware of how much wildlife needs a helping hand and like where to begin. Kate told a story about, you know, someone who had a plastic lawn and then they were like, where have the hedgehogs gone?
Yeah.
And so there's an interesting knowledge gap there, you know?
Yeah, and also with wildlife friendly garden, when we look at like the use of herbicides or pesticides or stuff like that, if you're going to go down a more organic route, which, you know, I'd encourage everyone to do, but that is still work, because usually the organic route is you spend more time in your garden, you spot the problems, you remove them, you encourage wildlife in to do it for you.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember the reason why it's hard work is because we've created this really false environment. So it's not really like a biodiversity rich place. Intact ecosystems self-regulate, right? The reason why you get big explosive populations of pests, for example, in a garden, it's because the equilibrium is totally out of kilter. In a biodiverse rich or like an ecology that is put together and okay, everything does balance itself out. You know, you do get boom and bust populations of things, cycles in years, but generally when you try and maintain this like perfect aesthetic in your garden, you're putting things out of kilter, which is why when you're growing vegetables and you're growing like a monoculture of vegetables, if you get a pest, it will go all the way through. But if you have more of like a permaculture approach and introduce different species in the same flower bed, and you end up kind of getting a bit more regulation. But sometimes to reach that equilibrium of biodiversity in your garden, it's going to take years. And the amount of like personal education that you have to do to like understand, and perseverance and time and labor, it's no wonder that not many people are doing it perhaps in the way that it needs to be done, or you feel like you've messed up and it's not where you need it to be. Which brings me on to that point of education. We're talking earlier about like, you know, the thing about using pesticides and plastic lawns. I think there is a lot of frustration at the public of like, oh, people just need to do better. And I think it's not fair. I think gardens are a fake thing anyway, right? Like we've created the concept of a garden as opposed to just having a wild landscape. We've created this concept of like, that's your bit and you can do what you want on it. You know, back in the day, long time ago, any bit of land that people had or common land was used for the purposes of growing vegetables and grazing your animals. So like the garden is quite a privileged concept. It's beautiful, but also you're trying to create this perfect little tiny space with any external pressures. You know, you might have a beautiful wildlife garden, but then either side you might have 2 plastic lawns. So you can only do so much in this kind of weird environment that we've created. So let's have a bit of kind of respect and understanding that those that want a plastic lawn, it's probably because actually managing a garden when you don't know anything about gardening is quite overwhelming. So there definitely needs to be like a big education program. You know, our schools should not be selling off their land. Our schools should be supported to have gardens and green spaces to teach people kind of like planting techniques and kind of any ancient knowledge that we have about what our wildlife needs to thrive and what native species that we have that can produce fruit and produce like sustenance and nuts and seeds and things like that. Like we need to be kind of giving the confidence for people at a really young age that you can plant things and they can grow and you can have agency to protect and be a steward of that green space. And a lot of people kind of don't have that. Obviously, everything that was said is amazing. I guess there's some really great ideas about how do we shift from where we are to where we might want to be. And I think it is, I'm probably less leaning against any scenario where there has to be enforcement. Because not only does it put a burden on the state and takes money away into an enforcement agency for people who have not got planning permission for a plastic lawn or a driveway, actually, if we invested that money in kind of education or like local community initiatives that taught people how to garden or whatever, maybe there are more long-term ways of dealing with it.
The thing I think that bugs me the most with plastic grass, and I said it in my chat with Kate, and I do say this as an able-bodied person, so I don't want to assume this, but I hate that attitude of that kind of, well, it's just for, you know, well, people need it because, you know, of mobility issues. And I'm like, but I just find that patronizing to kind of say that that's what people need. And I'm like, you kind of speaking on behalf of people here. Like, is it? Are you saying that people can't have access in any other way? Like, I just...
Yeah, and that's a load of rubbish,
It's a load of rubbish. If you really cared about it, go down and have a go at the train companies for not having good access on their trains, or go to every pub in London and say, why aren't you getting better, like, access for people with mobility? You don't give a shit about people with mobility issues. You just use it as a scapegoat, right?
Yeah, I hate it when people do that. They're just like, people with access issues. It's like, come on, you just think that you're better than people with plastic lawns because you have got the time, energy, resource, and knowledge and privilege to be in a situation where you can have a wildlife friendly garden and just judge other people. We need to look at why socially we've got a system where actually somebody who does have a garden, who might have like issues of not being able to garden that, why don't we have a more of a social system or a culture of supporting our older, like I saw this really cool thing on Instagram the other day, which was it's like a green gym. So it's like a way of a group joining a community group to keep fit, but instead of like doing weird, awkward lunges in the park on a Sunday morning together, they're actually finding social things that need doing locally, like painting a community centre or helping people mow their lawn. Like, you know, yeah, maybe people just think that these are pipe dreams and I'm just like imagining a utopia, but then why the hell not? Why can't we have systems set up that mean people can have gardens and they can have help managing them? And
absolutely. I mean, we've got neighbourhood WhatsApp groups. That's a start.
Oh, I swear to God, like if I don't know, like I would be more than happy spending half an hour just chopping down something.
I would.
For
I
somebody.
would genuinely, if anyone's got a garden, I might put it on my neighbourhood WhatsApp group and just say, if anyone wants anything done, if you want.
You came here for a week and didn't lift a finger.
Hey, that was my week off. And also, your garden's riddled with ticks.
It's horrible.
It's horrible. It's like an apocalypse out there. I'd have no blood left. It'd be like a pillow.
But no, you're
case.
like just. Oh God! If anyone's never experienced ticks, I wish you
just go visit Nadia.
to never go to my garden. But also, going back to that point where you like go back to the source. If people are worried that gardens are being turned into, being paved over for cars, then we need to be asking ourselves a question: why have we got so many cars? Why have we not got car parking space? And actually, maybe we need to rely less on a car economy and invest more in public transport. At the end of the day, gardens only make up a really tiny fraction of the landscape in England. We have a dire biodiversity situation, and it is not because of gardens. It's because of how we manage farms intensively. And we've covered this before when we did.
Yeah, it always comes down to the same things.
And so what I think gardens are important for is for the 87% of the population that have them, it's an important place for you to have a sense of belonging, to feel rooted to the land, to have a space that you can escape into. Two people I know really well, I don't know how they would have coped in the last 2 or 3 years if they couldn't pour their energy into their garden, attracting wildlife and just giving themselves the mindful opportunities to notice the comings and goings of butterflies on a daily basis and recording them and doing all that beautiful stuff. So like ultimately, yes, wildlife friendly gardening is really important, and to have places where hedgehogs can have havens and badgers and foxes and butterflies is not going to solve, I don't think personally, the biodiversity crisis. What it is going to do, it's going to give a huge portion of our population the opportunity to learn about wildlife, to learn about growing, to learn that they are part of something bigger. And I actually think that's the value in it. And that's why I'd like to see more opportunities for people to learn from a young age the art of what is possible when you have a bit of land. It is absolutely magic.
Which I would actually not argue, but I would actually say that what you've said there is a way to tackle the climate and biodiversity crisis.
There you go.
It's a less direct way. So we're not looking, gardens as a space, land size is not big, but as a potential to create culture change and the connection to nature and have that ability to grow people's love for the natural world, or to just appreciate that, wow, this is how much power the natural world can have in life. I think that is huge. 87% of the population, if half of that suddenly realise the power of nature, damn, that could be a big cultural change in the next 15, 20 years. So I think that's where
How do we do it? It has to be education.
I'll try clicking my fingers, and if that doesn't work, back to the drawing board.
Just put your feet in a garden pond, allow the toads to cling onto your legs.
And say hedgehogs 5 times with your eyes shut and see what happens. Hedgehog, badger, fox. The last thing I'll say on this episode to do with garden wildlife, I really liked what Kate said about learning about what's in your local area in terms of wildlife, and specifically invertebrates as probably the one group that can travel with ease in the garden, and birds as well, to see what you should put in. I think that's a lovely thing to do, and to connect with your kind of local patch, even if it was somewhere as big as North London. I know where I am in Highgate and Archway, we've got a very healthy population of Jersey tiger moths. Just incredible amount. You see them all the time throughout August and September. So, I thought down at the community garden, well, let's start planting their caterpillar food of red and white dead nettle, and you've got ivy that's already growing there. It's like, if we can get them in the garden, that'd be insane.
It's quite Google, isn't it?
Huh?
To learn this stuff. I like that. I mean, a shout out as well to my friend Tom Aspinall, who he's got an incredible, flower diverse rich garden, and whenever he goes anywhere he just kind of collects seeds of native flowers and then he's created this absolute mosaic. And I will also give another really amazing but a project I used to work on was called Wild About Tamworth, and it was a project in association with Tamworth Borough Council and the Wildlife Trust, Staffordshire Wildlife Trust. They worked together, so all of the green spaces, so just the normal council run parkland, which is often just grass, it's often just improved grassland. They worked together in a partnership to get local people, so volunteer groups managed each one of these green spaces in and around Tamworth, which is a really densely built up urban area, to make them wildlife friendly, replant native wildflowers and
Yeah,
have as opposed to just a big bit of green, they would mow enough for a football pitch so that people could still use it. And I was like, actually, there is the opportunity to look at some of our park areas where people and have like wild, and they can be spaces then for education, so people can be like, okay, so this is what like
absolutely
wild places. But it's such a good idea from Kate, learn about what's local.
Yeah, I love it.
And then figure out how do you get that in my space too, because then it's a corridor.
And it is, that's how we create corridors, specifically for biodiversity. If we look at that power, and I encourage everyone, I did a quick Google of my local area to find which butterfly species are popular. Butterflyconservation.co.uk is a brilliant website and charity to kind of look at that wherever you are in the UK. Look at what bees are usually around, or kind of, if you put a pond in, see if there's more ponds around you, to see if frogs are nearby and might need another pond or something like that. Just, it helps guide you a little bit, because there's so much information out there. If you suddenly go, I can plant this Mediterranean herb with some cowslips in the grass here, and that could help these species. I think that's where the starts of wildlife gardening are. But what a lovely episode talking about British gardens.
I feel wholesome.
It is a very wholesome thing, British gardens.
I think I better do some gardening.
I am not visiting your house for a while.
I know that you're coming in December.
I am not gardening in December in the Isle of Bute. I'd die.
One gardening day.
I'm not going to say yes on record.
That was lovely. I hope that's inspired you to... I'm assuming that our listeners... if you have a garden, probably
they probably
think about wildlife-friendly gardening.
Yeah.
But maybe how if you do have a wildlife-friendly garden, how do you export that to people around you?
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
There's some beautiful initiatives I've seen where towns have done wildlife-friendly gardening trails. So there's a day a year when people open up their gardens and you can come and see, and you can see who's got wildlife. I think there's all kinds of things that you can do to talk to your community.
Normalise it. Start buying people little plugs of wildflowers, native wildflowers for birthdays and stuff. So they have to put it out somewhere. That's what I do. Like I said to Kate, it's what I do to my dad. Now they're in the garden.
And burn rhododendrons.
And just go around with fire and torches and burn all
just burn them, with fire. Don't do that.
Don't do that. Please don't do that. Nerds, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Into the Wild. We will see you on the next show.
Lovely.
Goodbye.
I'll hang up my gloves.
Thanks for tuning into the show, nerds. If you don't already, make sure to follow us on social media at Into the Wild Pod on Twitter and at Into the Wild Podcast on Instagram.
And if you're able to and would like to, you can support the show by tipping us at ko-fi.com/Into the Wild Pod. That buys us the equivalent of a coffee, and we use it to fund more podcasts for your ears.
But until next time, keep well and live the good life.